All right, everyone, welcome. Today, we're diving into a challenge we all see in our practices basically every day, the furcation-involved molar. We're going to synthesize the latest evidence on everything from diagnosis and treatment to long-term prognosis, really moving past the old ways of thinking into a modern, evidence-based approach.
So let's just kick things off with a really critical question we all have to ask ourselves. What are our 2D radiographs hiding from us? I mean, how much alveolar bone loss are we actually missing? And what kind of impact does that have on the treatment plans we create?
You know, our conventional 2D graphs, they have some pretty serious limitations built right in. They create geometric distortion, and you get all that anatomic superimposition, like when a palatal root completely hides a maxillary furcation. But now with 3D imaging like cone beam CT or CBCT, we get a multiplanar, distortion-free view. It just eliminates so much of the guesswork.
All right, first up, let's really tackle this daily clinical problem head-on, the diagnostic blind spots that our conventional radiographs create.
And this isn't just theory, right? The numbers are pretty stark. One in vitro study found that only about 67% of osseous defects were correctly diagnosed using periapicals. Just think about that. That means we could be missing a third of the defects, especially on the buccal and lingual, which are pretty much invisible on a 2D film.
Okay, so we've established the problem. Now let's pivot to the solution and look at the hard data that really shows the superior diagnostic power of cone beam computed tomography.
Check out this number, 84%. What does that mean? Well, in one in vivo study, what they saw on the CBCT before surgery was confirmed by what they actually found during surgery 84% of the time. That is a massive leap in diagnostic confidence.
And it gets even better. Look at this, 3x. A study on dry skulls showed that CBCT picked up 3 times more fenestrations than just looking at them directly. Now, yeah, you might get some false positives, but it just goes to show you the incredible level of detail we're talking about here, the kind of subtle topography we'd miss otherwise. This table from a big systematic review of 13 studies really just pulls it all together. The conclusion is just undeniable. For assessing infrabony defects, for furcation lesions, for the alveolar bone crest, you name it, CBCT simply gives us a much clearer picture. So now that we're clear on how we can see the problem better, let's zoom in on one of the toughest clinical situations where this really matters, diagnosing and, more importantly, managing the furcation-involved molar.
Okay, first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What is furcation involvement? It's when periodontal disease has marched its way right into that interradicular space, causing bone resorption and attachment loss. It is a true three-dimensional problem that needs a 3D solution. And this is so important. This quote from the Scottish Dental Clinical Effectiveness Program Guidance should be our mantra. Furcation involvement alone is not an indication for extraction. Seeing a furcation isn't the end of the road for a tooth. It's the beginning of a conversation about a treatment plan.
Of course, it's not always simple, right? The local anatomy can really throw a wrench in things. A short root trunk, those pesky cervical enamel projections, narrow interradicular dimensions, they all make instrumentation a nightmare and can really worsen the prognosis. This is exactly where that CBCT shines. It lets us see these challenges before we even pick up an instrument.
Okay, so we've defined the challenge and we know the complicating factors. Now, what do we actually do about it? Let's walk through the evidence-based treatment pathways that we should be considering.
The SDCEP gives us a really solid practical framework. For grade 1 furcations, it's straightforward, non-surgical therapy. For grade 2 and 3, guess what? The first line of attack is still non-surgical therapy with the goal of medium to long-term retention. We only start really thinking about surgical management for the more advanced cases. It's not the default.
But, non-surgical therapy isn't our only play. We have more tools in the toolbox for the right cases. Things like open flap debridement, or root resection, or regenerative procedures should definitely be on the table. And for those class 2 furcation defects, guided tissue regeneration, GTR, is still showing the most predictable results.
All right, so now we get to the bottom line. The question every single patient asks us, Doc, how long is this tooth going to last? Let's see what the long-term survival data actually says.
This chart, wow, it tells a really powerful story. Look at the 5-year survival rate, a respectable 88.3%. Not bad at all. But then look at the 10-year mark, and it drops all the way down to 61.3%. So what does this tell us? Getting that initial stability is one thing, but keeping it there for the long haul, that's the real fight.
So what makes the difference? What predicts whether a tooth makes it to that 10-year mark? Well, the same study pointed to a few key variables. The severity of the defect, of course, that was a huge predictor. But there was another factor that was just as, if not more, influential.
And here it is. The single most influential factor for long-term survival is the frequency of supportive periodontal therapy, or SPT. It's that simple and that critical. The data is crystal clear. The teeth that were maintained had a significantly higher frequency of SPT visits per year compared to the ones that were lost. Consistent, frequent SPT is absolutely non-negotiable for success.
So, I really want to leave you with this question to think about in your own practice. With the diagnostic clarity we get from CBCT, with these clear evidence-based treatment pathways, and with the data showing that long-term survival is tied directly to maintenance, which molar do you now consider truly hopeless? The evidence suggests that that number might be far, far smaller than we once thought.